All right, we are it's 31 past the hour here, and here where I am in the U.S. on the West Coast, it's 8:31 a.m. I know it's evening for you guys, but people are joining the live, and more people will come in. But why don't we go ahead and get started? And I'm Dan Schoenbaum, the host. I'm our Chief Marketing Officer and threat intelligence subject matter expert. Happy to host both of you guys today. It's an exciting time because we are launching our global vulnerability intelligence report, and there's some, I would even say, shocking data in here, and some really challenging conditions for cybersecurity teams. So I've introduced myself. Both of you are from HiveForce Labs, and if you're not familiar with HiveForce Labs, it's an elite team inside of Hive Pro. We have 10 people on the team, and what the team does is they track and map threat landscape and the threat landscape and threat actors. And every day we publish more than one, usually multiple, sometimes 2 or 3 actionable advisories. And unlike traditional finished intelligence, these research reports can also be used inside of the products for breach and attack simulation and to actually drive automation. So this is more than just threat intelligence, and it really helps you with what I would call threat-informed intelligence. But I've said a lot in my intro. Let me just turn it over to you guys to introduce yourself. Sakshi, why don't you go ahead and say hello and introduce yourself and maybe a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So, hey everyone, this is Sakshi, and I'm a threat researcher at HiveForce Labs. So, I usually track the threats, connect the dots, and somehow ruin your Monday mornings by these threat alerts and advisories. Just kidding. I don't intend to do that, but it's better to hear it from us and then from the attackers themselves.
Awesome. Thanks for joining today. Ankit, hello, and why don't you just say do a quick intro as well?
Yeah, sure then. Hey, hello everyone. I am Ankit Mani and I manage threat intelligence operations at HiveForce Labs. I study how threat actors operate, how they evolve, what they are targeting, and I then make it your problem with threat alerts and by presenting it at events like this. Let me be real. I love helping organizations to proactively stop threats, and that's the passion I live with.
Awesome.
Thank you,
So
Dan.
maybe Ankit, we'll start with you. And by the way, if you could speak a little louder when you talk, that would be great for the audience. So
Sure.
report is available. It's live. And in this report, maybe I can cut to the chase. Over 48,000 vulnerabilities were announced last year. And the scary thing is we're on a run rate this year for exponential growth. There could likely be over 70,000 new vulnerabilities announced this year. And so for security teams, it's really, really hard to deal with that, right? It's virtually impossible, even with automation and AI, to eliminate all of those vulnerabilities. One of the scariest things in the attack, and I know you're about to talk about this, so I don't want to steal your thunder, is only a very small number of those vulnerabilities were actually attacked and targeted by attackers, and a lot of them were actually low severity vulnerabilities because, quite frankly, people know those aren't going to be patched first. So that's kind of a high level summary. But Ankit, maybe you can kind of go over in your mind, what are the top findings from the report? You and your team did a great job of pulling together all this data from a lot of information. What are kind of the high level points, if you can cover those?
Yeah, sure then. So it's a great report. Definitely, team has worked hard. They compiled vulnerability exploitation data from the last 5 years and analyze it from different viewpoints. Be it exploitation load, 0 days, attack vector, might attack take, and the platform where these vulnerabilities live in. The prominent insight we get from this analysis is that only 1% vulnerabilities are actually dangerous. If you know what 1%, you will be good. These 1% were actually exploited in real world attacks. 99% of others doesn't have a real world exploitation data. So if your scanner is showing 10,000 vulnerabilities in your ecosystem, then there is high likely only under 100 may have been actually exploited in real world attack. And you may be fixing the wrong flaw, which could be deprioritized for later. Moving to the second point, nearly half of all exploited CVs disclosed in the last year were 0 days, which practically makes patching our best defense completely off the table. And our attack vector analysis, we got to know that 23.8% are remote unauthenticated flaws, meaning they were exploited remotely without requiring any prior access to your network, which kind of makes all identity and access controls useless. The second to last finding map these flaws to MITRE attack tactic, and 50.4% of vulnerabilities led to arbitrary code execution, implying application whitelisting, the behavior monitoring, which were being planned or implemented in detection mode, now requires enforcing mode to protect against these majority of exploitation. And the final one, yeah, you read it right. Protectors became the victims, the firewalls, the VPNs. They were number one exploited platform category in 2025. And by the way, these are the tools considered difficult for patching and usually excluded from patch cycles. They harbor biggest exposure for you in 2025. Yeah, then I think these are kind of five major insights from the report, and it's a great report.
Excellent. Yeah, the QR code was on the screen if anybody wants to download the report. It's not a sales tool, it's actual threat intelligence. So we have thousands of people all over the world download our threat research. And so if you don't have your hands on the report after this session, please go ahead and download it. And we're always here to answer any questions. I guess I just had a question pop up in my mind, if you don't mind me kind of going off script here, Ankit. So it's, patching is always the remedy to a vulnerability, or the traditional remedy, I guess I could say. But all of these 0 days that are coming out, and people are concerned about Mythos and using AI. So a lot of these attacks are now AI generated. They're happening before a vendor releases a patch, or even an update or threat research on it. If you can't remediate and you don't have a patch for a 0 day, what can you do? A lot of people think about breach and attack simulation, but can you just touch briefly on breach and attack simulation? How can that help a company defend against these attacks?
Yeah, so breach and attack simulations can be a great toolkit to handle 0 day vulnerabilities. It can help you prepare for it, understand the anomalies which can arise in your system, and how do you deal with those anomalies in a timely manner. So, say if there is a vulnerability which get exploited, which is deploying some kind of a backdoor or a malware or a writing to a system, then if you have those kind of behavior monitoring controls and you are continuously testing those controls with a breach and attack simulation, then definitely you are gonna be uh, safe with 0 days, and these 0 days may not bother you or may not have a harder impact on you. So BAS is a great toolkit when it comes to 0 days and protecting yourself against unknowns.
Great, thanks, and thanks for indulging me on a off script question there. And we were talking about it earlier today, so appreciate you adding that as a toolkit. When you're facing 70,000 vulnerabilities, you're not going to patch them all. So breach and attack simulation is a good way to harden your infrastructure and just get prepared for the unknown, so to speak. Great. So over to you, Sakshi. I wanted to ask you a question. So one of the things I really enjoyed over the past few quarters is the CISO dinners that we've been hosting. I think we've hosted 5 or 6 now. And at these dinners, we invite 40, 50, sometimes even more CISOs. We get together and we talk about threat intelligence. I really enjoyed presenting actually the HiveForce Labs research on Iranian threat actors to those groups, and a lot of concern out there back last month and even today about Iranian threat actors. So those dinners are a great way for us to kind of take the pulse of CISOs globally. But at the dinners, one of the discussion topics that inevitably we have is, with all these vulnerabilities out there, 48,000 last year, potentially even 70,000 this year. Boards want to know: are we getting better? Are we advancing? Are we in a better place today than we were last quarter, last year, 2 years ago? And the big question that comes out is, how do we fix them? How are we going to sleep at night with all of these vulnerabilities out there? How should a CISO think about that? What's the right way to answer? And how do you handle all these vulnerabilities?
It's simple, Dan. Just share this report with them. We did an analysis of over last 5 years. So we got a count of vulnerabilities that was 161,000 vulnerabilities from the past 5 years. Just let me take a quick pause and ask you one question. What do you think, out of all of these vulnerabilities which I mentioned, what is the particular percent of vulnerabilities which you need to worry about?
I mean, I would probably say 20 to 30%. And I think most security practitioners would feel that way, right? I think that's probably a common view. There's probably also a common view of, we don't know, right? Nobody knows is the big problem.
Yeah. Sorry, Dan, you're not even close. So out of these 161,000 vulnerabilities, only around 1,200 were the exploited in wild vulnerabilities. So if you cut down to that percentage, it's less than 1%. So 1% vulnerabilities were exploited in real world attacks, or you can say were exploited in the wild. So first focus on these 1% of vulnerabilities, and then later you can worry about, or you can prioritize the remaining 99% of the vulnerabilities. And also one more thing comes to my mind is the severity. So if you check the vulnerabilities from the severity lens, it is relevant, it might look relevant, but the real world attacks have a complete different story to it. So, as Ankit, you commonly say that attackers filter by utility and not by severity. So, that answers it all. It's time to ditch the severity based triage and to move towards the threat informed decisions.
Got it. I find that really interesting, because the natural tendency is to go for the most severe vulnerabilities, the one that's on fire, the one you want to patch. But like you said so eloquently, the vulnerabilities that are being exploited are the low vulnerability, kind of the ones that you should be least concerned about, because attackers are smart. They know that those are the ones that aren't getting any focus. And so, security teams without a threat-informed approach have a lot of vulnerabilities. It's sort of this hamster wheel phenomena of just trying to patch and eliminate as many as possible. But that's a futile approach. It's not going to work. It's not sustainable. And I think what I would urge is for security teams to step back, and it's really, I think, about working a lot less, and just being smarter, right? Take a laser beam approach versus a broad shotgun approach where you're focusing on so many different vulnerabilities. So really interesting data. I guess a question I had when I read the report, and I also noticed it on the slide, is that there are over 2,000, I think it was 2,200 exploitable vulnerabilities in the report. So what does that mean, and how do we connect this to what you were just talking about, Sakshi?
Yeah. So Dan, these flaws basically you can consider and categorize them amongst two. So one being the exploitable flaws, and other being the exploited in the wild flaws. So exploitable flaws, you can consider them as a second level of priority. First one, always being the exploited in the wild flaws, or the exploited in the wild vulnerabilities. And if you ask me about the exploitable vulnerabilities, I can cut them into 4 points and keep it in front of you. First one being the POC. So, POC is a proof of a vulnerability that it can be exploited. It is generally done in a lab, or you can say a controlled environment, and may not be possible in real life environments. Then coming to the second one will be the exploit kits. So these are basically the packed and the ready to use exploits which are polished, and you can have them mostly bundled in a malware ecosystem. Third one, we can see it as pen test frameworks. So everyone and you also must have heard about frameworks like Metasploits, ExploitDB. These are nothing but these are used by the red teams and they are used for the pen testing purposes. And last but not the least, the fourth one are the wormable ones. So wormable malwares are specifically the ones which self-propagate themselves, and they spread in your network rapidly. And they can just go here and there everywhere wherever you can't even imagine. And what clicks to my mind is the famous one. Everyone must have heard about it, the WannaCry one. So WannaCry is a great example of this worm. And if we remember in 2017, Eternal Blue was used to exploit the SMB, and then this WannaCry was traveling across the network like a free bird.
I remember that.
Yeah. And if we check for the recent ones, we all know that there is a buzz going on about the current supply chain that is exploiting the and spreading the bug malware called as mini shy hulud, that is causing a havoc in the npm ecosystem. So, Dan, to sum it up and to give it a short one liner to you, you have two flaws. One are the exploitable ones, other ones are the exploited and wild ones. First, always and always prioritize the exploited and wild, and then you can jump up to the exploitable flaws.
Got it. Okay. Well, over to Ankit. I have a question. So, and based on what we just talked about, so does this mean if I patch both exploited in the wild and exploitable, which are under 2,500 vulnerabilities from last year, how should I approach, and do I need to worry about anything from an exposure perspective?
Sadly, yes, Dan, there is another elephant in the room called misconfigurations. So they don't get a lot of attention. They don't get CVs number as well. They are environment specific and difficult to track. So whether you say it's permissive access, poor credentials management, bad device configurations, they quietly create the same gap which we get through the vulnerabilities. So I will break it down with few pointers. Let's say you patched in remote desktop system or the Windows RDP vulnerability, but you didn't configure account logout policy. Attacker will not need an exploit. They will just brute force it. So the need of an exploit because of misconfiguration will no longer be there. And misconfigurations are not limited to systems and network devices. They are just as common in our security ecosystem as well. Like a permissive firewall rule, say any to any policy with no port definition, which kind of creates unnecessary exposure, and uh, and no amount of I would say patch or anything can fix this. And trust me, these kind of firewall rules do exist, not on the parameter but definitely on the internal firewall, and most of the enterprises are running this. And sometimes we get one false positive on EDR, and someone will jump to disable entire behavior detection rule, which uh, which makes your security tool kind of a toy gun, which just which just creates sound, and only people close to it will hear it and then ignore it. So it's a dummy toy, nothing else. And then the last point is the security coverage. So you have deployed EDR agents across thousands of machines, say 10,000 machines in your organization. That's good. That's great. But is anyone monitoring the health of it? Agents stop updating, some go silent, some are dead. And guess what? After initial access, suppose if I have initial access to your house, I will not look for the locked safe. I will first locate safe which is unlocked. And that's what attacker does. They will not go after your most protected system. They will hunt for exactly these machines which have the dead EDR. I hope that answers your question. So exposure management includes both vulnerabilities and the misconfigurations.
Got it. No, thank you so much. Earlier in the conversation, we were talking about AI and attacks from Mythos. So maybe we could wrap up with a question that's probably on everybody's mind. You know, there's a lot of I would say some excitement, but probably more angst and concern over Anthropic. The Mythos from Anthropic. So if I could ask you, Sakshi, like, what about the threat that's coming from these frontier AI models? Mythos, in my mind, is really so dangerous. It creates an exploit virtually in minutes, and it makes the exploitation window go from, months or quarters down to weeks, down to, really almost zero. So if there's no time to react, no time to get informed, we already on this call touched on using breach and attack simulation to kind of get ready and harden your infrastructure before the unknown attack comes. But outside of that, how could defenders and CISOs prepare for the impact of something like Anthropic Mythos or just any other AI generated attack that's a 0 day on steroids, really, right? It's coming out of nowhere and it's preparing for the unknown. So what are some ways that organizations can get ready for that and get a little more confidence that they're in a good position?
Yeah, that's definitely a pivotal moment for the industry, Dan. And sometimes this number that is increasing just scares me, because in coming days the number is going to increase tremendously. However, if you have a clear distinction between vulnerability and a risk, that would always help your organization to survive from such risks. And yeah, to answer your question about the frontier AI models, they have already started flooding us, and we don't know that how long and till which extent they are going to do that. But there is always a way. What we can do is we just need to filter the vulnerability correctly. So if you filter your vulnerability load in correct filters, that is, if you consider the exploitability, you consider the enterprise security context, the application reachability, and true exposure to arrive at the real risk, then I'm sure that your organizations are going to survive through it.
Got it.
Great. I think that's a great point, Sakshi. The distinction between vulnerabilities and real risk, and then we just need to follow the same playbook. Essentially, we just need to validate the attack feasibility in the context of our organization, security controls, and application reachability. Uh, then I would recommend organizations to start integrating vulnerability management programs with breach and attack simulation. Run vulnerability simulation in your network with controls you have and see if materialize into risk. This way, your risk will be a lot personalized as per your environment, and you can use it as use the simulation output as a further step for prioritization.
Great. Well, we're almost out of time, but sometimes I like to take questions from the audience. And we did get one. If I rewind to the last question, and the last question, just as a refresher, we were talking about misconfiguration. So a question came in from somebody who's watching the live, and I'll ask this to you, actually to either of you, but you mentioned that one false positive on an EDR can disable behavior detection entirely. So how do you see security teams accidentally weakening their own defenses through misconfiguration?
Yeah. So problem is usually we prefer usability. We prioritize usability when it comes to the actual working environment, and we kind of sideline the security. So if there is a EDR monitoring which is in the enforcing mode, and your some application is not working, so instead of fine tuning it, working further on it, understanding what is causing the problem, the first thing that anybody does is to disable the policy on that host machine or maybe a set of machines, and with an intention to later uh, troubleshoot it and identify the gap. But then we kind of forget with, and it kind of became a permanent uh, whitelisted policies in the ADR, and that create a big misconfiguration gap.
Excellent. Well, we're out of time. We're actually over time. We try to keep these to 15 minutes, but there's so much great data in this report that we decided to go longer today. So I just want to thank you both. You're normally busy doing threat research. You guys have produced a lot of amazing material. We have 4 different reports alone on Iranian threat actors, which I see how many people consume and download those globally. Those have been really popular because, while there's a ceasefire in the Middle East, which is a great thing, the attacks haven't stopped. And they're attacks on really the world, but primarily focused on Middle Eastern countries and in North America. We're seeing a lot of activity. So those threat reports are out there and they're available. And of course, the new threat report that we just launched, the QR code's been on the screen the entire time. But if we can at least end with that QR code, if you scan this is available to anybody. It's not just for Hive Pro customers. All of our threat intelligence is free. And if you go to our website, we literally have thousands of different articles. You can search by type of attack, region, name of threat actor, and there's a lot of information there, not just on them, but their TTPs, how you can respond, how you can better prepare and defend yourself. So I urge you to can take a look at that information and use it to better prepare yourself and your organization. So Sakshi and Ankit, I just want to thank you guys for joining. It's been fun hosting you guys. And, we do this every other Thursday. So looking forward to seeing the audience for our next session. But thank you guys. This has been fun and I enjoyed having you both today. Great job on the report.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks everyone. Have a good day. Good evening.